We are the Four Podmen, the pro wrestling podcast brought to you each and every week on the Dynamo Podcast Network. Head over to YouTube, super kick that subscribe button, clothesline that bell notification. Audio versions of our show are also available on Anchor. And joining me tonight, the four men are back together, rekindled for a very special episode where we're going to take a look in depth at the role of a pro wrestling manager, no less. Joining me as always, Joe the Beef Duignan. Joe, how we doing, my man?
All good, pal. All quiet out west.
The podfather of the Dynamo Podcast Network, sporting that beautiful Orlando, nearly the home of wrestling at this stage. Shirt.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's a good show.
Also joining me tonight, my hot tag partner, the DOGG, fresh off an emotional roller coaster of an Ultimate Warrior episode. If you haven't checked that out, get over to the Dynamo Podcast Network. Check that out. Both himself and a shout out to Jonathan O'Dwyer from Pro Wrestling Defined came on. We had a beautiful episode last week celebrating the journey of an outstanding man. Well, lads, managers, where do we begin? Ian, take us off on managers.
Well, I suppose without like, where do you start? Let's not get into the names then. If we're starting out with the role of the manager, how pivotal it is. Like, in my opinion, if someone was to say to me that was green or that had never been involved in wrestling, said, why would a wrestler have a manager when it's all fake? Because people love that F word. For that very point, to bring some realism, to bring some actual realism to it. I think when you look at the role of a manager throughout the years, it boils down to like maybe three factors, right? You've got the guy 9 out of 10 times, it's the mouthpiece. It's always a guy who had a lot of charisma that was maybe a little bit too small to kind of be a worker himself. 9 out of 10 of them could work anyway, without a shadow of a doubt, but they were a little bit too small. They probably had too much charisma to be a referee or be a, just somebody in the back. And it was somebody that knew the business inside out also. They knew the business aspect. They knew how to, but also knew how to get someone else over. So like 9 out of 10 managers that were great were always heels, right? Let's be real, because that's what the heel knows how to do, is get the baby face over and also get the other heel over. So they always lived vicariously. A great manager lives vicariously through his talent, but also knows how to separate himself from the talent. It's not a case of, it's also a chemistry thing. It's not a case where you can just throw, project X with project Y and hope that throw it in a blender and hope it comes out like a nice little smoothie. It's a little bit more than that. They got to have a little bit of a relationship. They build a relationship together. In a lot of ways, back in the day, it was probably no different than a tag team, to be fair. They travel together. They're almost like their agent in real life as well. So there's that element of kind of like, we always hear Paul Heyman call himself the advocate. And that's kind of really what makes a great manager, in my opinion, is somebody that is a mouthpiece that can convey the message that his client wants to convey without, but they don't have the words for it. You know what I mean? It's like, am I making sense, or am I talking?
Yeah, absolutely making sense.
On,
yeah. That'd be my opinion on a manager. Yeah. You know what I mean? I don't think it's somebody that you just have coming down looking great and fucking, just spinning all the typical bullshit out. It's somebody that can create heat, can get their client over and really push the narrative of getting the babyface over, but also their client. Most managers were heels. So I think that's where I come from on it.
I remember listening to Jim Cornette one time saying that not only was he the manager, but he was also the babysitter, because if you remember the old culture of the drinking and everything else and the road trips, because these guys used to go road trips. But he said his role as a manager was to make sure that the Midnight Express got to the next town, to the next show, to make sure that they were there. Just to add to your point as well, I remember many, many moons ago, I went to the opening of a pro wrestling school. And I remember one guy rocked up, and I was only there just to be there for the opening bit of crack, you know. But I remember a guy came in the door and he said to one of the head trainers that was there, he says, I'm just here because I want to become a manager, not necessarily a wrestler. And your man said, yeah, that's no problem. He says, just jump on the mat there and let me see what a back bump is like. And the man goes, what? And it was just, I just thought it was brilliant in terms of reaffirming your point that like
that's exactly it. Like, you know what I mean? Because like I'm at that stage of life now where if I were to return to wrestling in Ireland, I'll be looking at the manager kind of side of things, because it's like, you know what I mean? And that's hypothetical. I'm just using that as an example because you do have to have a broad understanding of the business, like in the ring, what it takes to create a great match. It's all well and good somebody sitting on the outside and going, I know that's a good match. It's great. But having the mechanics of knowing how work is, knowing how to listen to the crowd, because don't forget, the manager outside is listening to the crowd constantly and being the pivotal factor in controlling what the crowd do and don't do. Do you know what I mean? So
it's arguably the most fluid role in professional wrestling from top to bottom. You have to be at one aspect. There is no two managers do it the same, just like pro wrestling, but at the apex of quality constructive managerism, managerism.
That's a new one. I like it though.
Okay.
You've got to be part booker, part fucking promoter, part talker, part talent. You've got to be liquid. When some men are so rigid and structured in a certain particular role in the business, which is necessary and vital to the business, a man has to be there, or a woman who has to be able to facilitate every other fluid aspect of the business. It's the grease between the wheels that has been in the business for the last 80, 90 fucking years. It can be everything, or it can be as simple as looking good in a fucking mini skirt. It doesn't matter. And I'm not taking that away from the lower caste of rung of management. That's a vital role to whatever the athlete or the talent in question has, to be able to turn her on or turn her off, to know when you're outshining who's in that ring, or know when you're picking up the slack without even doing that, and to be on at all times. The manager is the straight up on switch in your production. He has to be able to go and not turn it off 24/7. If you've got a guy, we'll say, who has to be somewhat of an aloof character, it's the manager who has to go get fucking heel off the kids and the families and be the fucking jackass and the asshole. It's the one person in wrestling who never truly get a full grasp of who they are as an actual person, simply because the minute they break that curtain, they're almost the closest you'll get to a professional actor or actress in the business. It's an excellent subject.
It's a good point, actually, Jay. To touch on those points as well, it's actually probably one of the most difficult roles.
Yes,
because of the fact that you've got to know that you want to get yourself over as a star manager so people believe what you're saying, but at the same time you don't want to get yourself over too much of a level that like you're going to overshadow the star. A case in point is the Diamond Stud, you know what I mean, DDP. The guy's coming out dressed in all the gimmicks and actually as big as the guys that he's bringing out, you know what I mean, in some cases bigger, in some cases a larger man. So it's it's a
if you fill the borders of your role, you can transcend your role, but you've still got to stay in the shadow of your talent. But at that same time, be liquid, be fluid, be everything sometimes and nothing at other times. It's a very cerebral role. It's probably the most cerebral role in pro wrestling.
You gotta be on point. I mean, there was some managers that were able to go out and drink beer, no problem, and be pissed as a fucking scoop. Shout out to you, Captain Lou. But you know what I mean? But at the same time, I dare say I'd actually trust, a wrestler going out with a few beers on them and having a match, because they're going through the motions, than a manager. Because like you said, they gotta be everything. They're almost the agent. A lot of managers book matches as well, so they gotta be agent on the ground. They gotta hear the crowd for the green guys as well. So it's just so many elements to it. What about you, Joe? I'd say you probably agree with all that.
Yeah, I do, lads. And like the thing about a manager is they don't get a rest hold. They don't get to take a break after a big move and lie there and just sell as if they're dead. Those guys are on unless they take a bump. They're on the whole 10, 15, whatever minutes that match is on for. They're going the whole time. And as you said, Ian, they have to listen to the crowd. If the crowd's dying, they've got to get them back into it.
Yeah.
They can't just be standing there going, it's up to those two lads to do it. It's, they know I've got to do something here to get these guys either booing the shit out of someone or cheering someone whatever.
Yes,
You know,
they
so-
babysit the atmosphere. Yes.
That's a great way of putting it, you know. And so they have to be on. They have to be switched on the entire time, and you know, and they have to, as you said, Ian, or I'm not sure which of you said it, but they have to be full of charisma. You know what I mean? Because they just have to be. Because, as I said, you have to be switched on the entire time. But at the same time, as you guys said, they can't take away from what's happening in the ring. So there is that, as you guys said, that delicate balance between being over the top, being being obnoxious or whatever,
being on and being
but
over.
then you know, kind of keeping it at a certain level, so people aren't. They don't want to be the fucking beach ball.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That everyone fucking looks at. You want to keep.
I brought my manager on screen right now.
Yeah, you want to keep eyes in the ring, and so it is a delicate balance. I wouldn't envy that job myself. I don't think I'd be too good at it. But no, they're fantastic, and the good ones, you know who they are. It's easy to spot them.
It's kind of funny when you go down through the history of the business and you look at managers, and I mean, to an extent, valets as well and stuff like that. But it's there hasn't been too many. You know what I mean? When you think about it, I mean, if you go down through that list, you know, there hasn't been a lot of them in terms of, if you think about the amount of wrestlers that have gone through their careers and the amount of workers that have been in the business. When we think about managers, we think, what has there been? 20, maybe, if even.
You say that now, but like I'm sure there's many we can't think of. It's just, you know, there's not many great ones. Maybe is the way to put it. Like, whereas
There's a lot of impressions. There's a lot of talents do impressions of who they've seen before them, but to be completely original. I mean, again, there's another fucking excellent aspect of the conversation I haven't seen. Sorry for fucking hijacking you here, Joe. The filtration system for quality management in the wrestling business is a hell of a lot stricter and tighter and more refined, because we know straight away, we've seen you before get a new gimmick. We've seen you, whereas you can carbon copy wrestlers all fucking day. Sometimes you just need them to take bumps and do their part well. The filtration system for quality management is ridiculous. You know, from the fucking bingo halls to the big arena. If you don't have something original about you, you ain't making that journey to the top if you're a manager, because there's 10 of you in every fucking town, and having them out isn't enough.
Yeah, very true. Very true. So I suppose when we sit down and we think of a pro wrestling manager, I mean, who jumps in there and you know, what are the things? Go ahead in. What are the things we look for?
There's only one. There's only one that always comes out straight away, and it is Bobby the Brain Heenan. And I'm sure it's a name that we all can agree with. And I think I'm gonna let Jay, because we spoke off there, and Jay made some really good points on it too.
God damn it, did I write them down?
Yeah. Like Bobby the Brain Heenan, I mean, a masterclass on commentary. I mean, you talk about a man that earned his paycheck. He would do commentary and then go out and maybe manage 2 or 3 matches and then come back to commentary. He was the star of the show. I'll give you an example. My father and my uncle, who got me into pro wrestling, watched wrestling. You know, they enjoyed some of the characters, enjoyed a lot of the wrestlers, you know, and the colorful characters, especially of the 80s and WWF and at the time. But they mainly watched it for Bobby the Brain Heenan, because they didn't know what he was going to say. You know, if he got a victory, he'd be there kind of going, we got you. But like, if something bad happened, good Lord, he'd have the collar open. You know, he'd go from dressed smart. He'd have the collar open. His head would be sweating. His hair would be messy. I tell you, you know, he'd be going in those little phony dressing rooms.
This is preposterous. Get me Jack Tunney on the phone.
Yeah,
no, my watch. My guy was cheated out of it.
The old gimmick. Remember the old blue gimmick phone in the back room that looked like a prison? It was like, and he'd have everyone there, and all the boys had to do was stand in the back and go, "Ah, God damn it!" You know, like literally the epitome of a pro wrestling manager and the work that goes into what a top tier level, the upper tier, which you can also find on the Dynamo Podcast Network. You know what I mean? A top tier. That's, I mean, Bobby the Brain Heenan is the absolute cream of the crop when it comes to that. And I think, Jay, you mentioned at the start, not only a manager, he managed men that didn't even need a manager because they were all so great talkers. But like you said, and I'll let you specify.
No issue with the comment. You've extracted it more refined than I was shooting from the mouth. Go.
Yeah, like, I mean, you made a point that it was almost like the NWO before the NWO, and it's true because he had the Heenan family. I mean, he had someone like Andre the Giant and gave Andre the Giant purpose again in WWE in the sense of he didn't have to speak. And when Andre would speak sometime, hey, Hulk Hogan and go get take you. You know what I mean? You wouldn't know what he was saying, but Andre would only have to say maybe 2 or 3 words, and you'd hear that deep voice and see the fucking million teeth that he had, and you were like, shit, that guy's scary. You know what I mean? Whereas Bobby done the fucking groundwork just to build it up to the level of one guy only has to say 2 things. I mean, case in point is the Ric Flair interview after he lost the belt. And he's losing the plot, you remember? And Heenan's going, that's a fucking, like, he's only shorted, and Flair's hair's all over the place, and they're all in the background. Perfect is there in the back going, God damn it. It's like, it felt real. It felt real. It didn't feel staged. It was like, like these boys are probably on about 20 grams of coke, fair enough, probably after hitting the sauce straight after the match. But God damn it, was it entertaining? So
there's another, you're after hitting on an accidental point there as well, which I'm only after realizing it again. I love these fucking conversations, man. It didn't matter how over or how
you're the yin
heel.
to my yang, Jay.
But he was running the proto NWA, but long before half the card was his stable. Half the heels were his boys, and it didn't matter how over you were as a heel. It didn't matter if they seen you fucking clotheslining babies from fucking the hands of fucking mothers 3 weeks ago. If you were sitting there, the fucking Prince of Hell, you were the devil himself. If you turned on Bobby Heenan, you were babyface next week. And that's rare calico when a man is so heel over that you could be fucking Stalin himself and slap Heenan in the chops, and next week the crowd's cheering for you. To have that switch in one man as a conduit.
Listen, I believe
Adolf, whole card.
He could have turned Hitler babyface. That's how
he
good
he could have turned anybody babyface. All he'd have to do, like I remember the series when I was a young fella, I loved listening to Heenan talk, but they used to do these fly in the wall segments, and I remember there was one time where the Gorilla Monsoon and Heenan were kind of back towards us, but they were at a urinal wall, and they were doing these, like they were laying the tapestry for the turn of Andre after Hogan. It shouldn't have been possible for Andre to bleed and switch over, but I remember that the comment was, "Hey Gorilla, you see those urinal cakes down there?" I was like, "Yeah, I do. Why?" "Well, Andre's so stupid, he thinks they're sweets, or, he thinks they're candy. I've seen him pick them up and eat them. No shit, no bull, no fooling." And, like, obviously, Mon says, "Would you stop?" And you're like,
Do you remember they'd done a show? I remember just 2 little things to point out how good he was in commentary and how, because, I mean, Bobby probably deserves his own show, but I suppose we don't.
He will get it.
He will get it. But there was 2 bits in particular. I remember it might have been SummerSlam '92, or it might have been a different. One, and I remember him going, "Yeah, I've been offered to be the King of England." Like, would you stop? He's like, "It's true. Fish and Chips offered to sponsor me." Chips offered to sponsor, as if it's a company. And then the other one, I remember I had this one on a Coliseum home video. Now, Noel, you might remember this. I remember remember they used to have specific ones with their top stars. Bret Hart had one called Bret Hart's Greatest Hits. Yeah. And I remember he was wrestling someone like Skinner, and it's in one of those, just a proper dark match, and Bret gives the glasses to this girl, and it's only a kid, maybe like 10 or 11, but she's real kind of long and slender and has absolutely huge like huge teeth, and of course people are going to go, "Oh, that's probably not a great looking kid," but Bobby decides that he'll address it. He goes, "Would you look at the tusks on that kid?"
He was a bastard. He was absolute pure heel.
I think it was Vince McMahon that was commentating beside him on those old ones, because they probably did it in the studio, you know what I mean? And Vince is just like, "Bobby, stop it." And he goes, "What? I'm just telling the truth." It's like,
The two that always come to mind with me was the storyline with Ken Patera, and then Ken ended up beating 6 shades of shit out of him. Really, he took a hiding off Ken.
yeah.
And the other one, after WrestleMania 3, where he was pushing the legal angle for the 3 count that wasn't. Remember that? That was so good. The way he pushed that was absolutely brilliant, you know.
But he was just I'll give, before we move from Bobby, just one.
We'll have to, because he's getting his own episode.
Yeah, but one pivotal point to kind of verify what I was saying earlier about, you know, how the show was built around Bobby. Because it really was, you know, a lot of these shows really were. Like, if you look at how many pay-per-views were built around Bobby the Brain Heenan, I would say it's absolutely amazing. But one of the first Raws, when they done it in New York in that little place, do you remember? And the whole fucking storyline throughout the whole show, the glue that kept the show together and that wanted people to come back, that they wanted people to keep watching, was when he was trying to get into the arena when he was banned. And do you remember he had the wig on and he dressed himself up as a little old woman? And he goes, "What are you talking about? No, that's me." And that was his way to get in. Doesn't that just prove what we've been saying? How important, and that's why Bobby isn't necessarily just a manager. He's incredible, but it shows you the levels of talent.
You know what he is?
He's
like, that should be the Bobby the Brain Heenan rule. It's like when you talk about tag, there's no point in having that conversation until you extract the Legion of Doom from it. It's like, there's one thing that the world agrees on, is like, when you transcend your role, you're something else. It's no longer fair to the also-rans or the running competition to have you in the same circle of conversation, because you're otherworldly, you're different. I mean, he was part stand-up comedian, part bleeding stuntman. He was everything and nothing at the same time. He was just a manager, but he was also managing half the card. I mean, he's like, he transcends. He's you can't call him a manager. He's so much more than that. It doesn't a disservice to even put any kind of title on him. Like,
yeah, I'll tell you what I would put. I'll tell you, there is one title that I put on Bobby the Brain Heenan, and I think he's up there with the biggest ones. You can name Hogan, you can name Hogan, you can name Austin, you can name The Rock, you can name Brett, all these guys, Warrior. There's one name for him, and that's Star, an absolute superstar. Like, literally, he was probably one of the most talented men of all time. So we'll move on from Bobby.
And clearly bled wrestling.
Noel or Joe, sorry.
Come on, Joe.
Look, when you're talking there about managing half the roster and that, would Hulk Hogan have been as big without Bobby Heenan?
No.
Because Bobby Heenan was the biggest rival he had.
That's a great
Let's be honest, lad. Nearly every rivalry Hogan went in, Heenan was in their corner.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I wonder if he would have been...
Great point.
Yeah, I wonder if Hogan would have been as big without him. You know?
I don't think so. Actually, now that you say it, Joe, off the bat, no, I don't think so, because even when you look at him, when you know, he would side with Bundy, he would side with, you know, he'd always have his little guys. It's like
anybody but the big guy.
You know what I mean? It was just incredible. Yeah, no, I'm surprised I didn't see him in Warriors Corner at WrestleMania 6.
Oh, he hated him.
Yeah, they weren't friends.
Well, the problem was, no way. Yeah, listen, it was a clash of new versus old. The problem there, the other fella wasn't pro wrestling. Bobby Heenan bled turnbuckle. He just, every aspect of his life was pro wrestling. He's one of them. Do you know what I mean? He's a fucking lifer, and like you said, it was Hogan versus his stable for about 8 bleeding years.
One last one before we hand it over to the host. Hey, I remember I was the neighborhood champion once. We're like, you never held a belt. I did, in my neighborhood. And what were you the champion? What were you the champion of? I told you, my neighborhood. Just like stupid, but fucking genius. Yeah. So rest in peace, Bobby.
Absolutely, and definitely will have his own episode without a shadow.
I think so.
Has to happen.
Yeah.
Ian, I have to go for you with this one. Okay, this is one for you, because you always talk about this lady with such love and affection.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
The sensational Sherry Martell. Ian, talk to me about Sherry. Where do we begin? Again, not dissimilar to the female version of Bobby, nearly, you know.
Yeah, I
But,
would say, to steal an adage from Mr. Kennedy, easy on the eye. To some men, she probably wasn't easy on the eye. They actually had to make her try and look hideous, whereas she was quite the opposite. I love that grunty Texas accent as well. Like, yeah, but make sure the boss isn't listening to me here. She's no longer with us, Rachel. She's much older than me. No, I'll give you a funny story. There was a pro wrestler over here in a certain gym that you mentioned, Noel, earlier, when it was opening, by the name of Greg Burridge, the Puka one. And
that's it.
remember, he said to me, "Would you? Just a weird question, mate, but would you put it into Sherry?" I said, "What a stupid question, my friend. I'm not even going to dignify that question with an answer."
Is it obvious day already?
No, all joking aside, Sherry was one of the staples of my childhood as well. I mean, I remember, and some of you will, actually most of you will. I remember with Rude as well, when she came out with Rude on occasion. Obviously later she was with Michaels and stuff like that, but in the early days when Macho King came around and they had that kind of darkness over the Macho Man, they really made that whole get up that they put on Macho King actually, and having her there brought a darkness to the character in a little subtle way, you know what I mean? In a nice natural way. She was you want to talk about great workers. Sherry Martell is one of the greatest workers ever, inside and outside of the ring. She was as tough as the boys. She could drink as much as the boys. She could work her ass off as well as any of the boys. And I mean, better men than me have said that, we all know my fucking guy, Brett, doesn't give too many people compliments. And he said that, that she could literally go and match guys hold for hold in training. You know what I mean? So what she was capable of was incredible. So again, we're coming back to the aspect of someone that was a worker, but obviously we're at a time where female wrestling probably wasn't at its apex. But at the
possibly
same time,
one of the only people in the world in the history of the sport ever to outshine the Macho One.
Yeah, no,
and quite
100%.
Often. And that's like trying to eclipse the fucking sun. That's no easy feat.
That scream that you do, that big promo. I always love that Texas accent. I don't know what it is. That promo. But the scream that you would do, like, and she would talk, she would make sense. I mean, if you listened through all the screaming, everything she said made sense. She was very, very articulate in her own way. She got the guys over that she was with. And good Lord, was she something to watch on the outside, just as an absolute maniac. I mean, when you knew when those heels were coming off, shit was going down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, she had warrior levels of energy outside the ropes.
Yes,
like, he
that's
got the
exactly,
stop running, she didn't.
That's actually exactly it. She had that warrior level. She'd be screaming at the fucking, and then you'd see her like putting her face into like grown men's face in the crowd. Good Lord, yeah. What can I say about Sherry other than, yeah, I mean, she is pretty much the female Bobby. She did have her own stable almost at once. If she put them all together and
Jesus, can you imagine that stable if it was running at the same time? Holy shit!
Whoa, yeah.
You know what I mean? A stable of champions.
Yeah, I love sensational Sherry, Queen Sherry, whatever.
You know what I love about her now? When I watch shoot interviews, if you watch her shoots, watch her. Just watch her. Just fucking go to YouTube and type Sherry shoots. She's such a sweet, affable, decent, humble, positive person.
Soft spoken as well.
She slings no shit. She just says good about everybody. Even when half of our love of this business is the fact that most of the men hate each other in the locker room. When you hear her talk about people, she's very positive and complete antithesis of what she portrayed on screen. She's just a diamond. There's
nothing bad about anybody, and
she's an absolute diamond.
That proves to me that she was the utmost professional. I know a lot of people said she had her old habits and stuff like that, but who didn't back then? You know what I mean?
Fucking to run with that locker room, if you walk out without habits, you're not human.
But for her to be accepted as one of the boys, do you know what I mean? We're talking about a meat grinder of boys here, where you got fucking liberals, you've got fucking Republicans who are walking around with their guns, especially in the 80s.
Good
I
man,
ain't
bad
having
man.
no fucking woman in here, boy. You know, she was welcome into any locker room. As you said, Jay, she's such a soft-spoken woman as well. And I've never heard anyone say a bad word about her. And I've never heard her say a bad word about anybody. So, you know, I really appreciated when Kurt brought her back for Sexy Kurt.
Absolutely.
I actually wrote that. I wrote that down for Sherry, the Sexy Kurt thing.
Yeah.
That was genius. But the other thing, like she was responsible for one of the most legitimately emotional moments in pro wrestling history, when Macho and Elizabeth got back together. Because, you know, that was pretty much, as you said, Jay, it was pretty much all her, because she completely eclipsed Savage in that program. And if it wasn't for that, it would have been a classic moment, but it wouldn't have been nearly as emotional as it was. Like grown men weeping in the crowd.
Me included.
Just because
the whole program was emotional perfection.
Joe, that's actually a good point you made, Joe.
And all because...
Sorry, no, I'll let you continue. I was just going to say that was a good point, because it's kind of similar to what we were saying about Bobby earlier, isn't it? She wrote that narrative, like.
No, completely. It's like everyone hated her that much, and what she'd done to Elizabeth and Savage, and it was all her, and you know, everyone wanted to see her get her comeuppance and the whole thing, and it was entirely up to her, you know. And as Jay said, to eclipse Savage at that time was, you know, it just didn't happen. And yet she did it.
Shouldn't be possible.
Made that program. Yeah, it was amazing. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, I remember I was at WrestleMania 22 and we had the breakfast morning the day before Mania, and she was part of the breakfast entourage that we were at that session. There was about 500 people in a wedding reception room having a breakfast, and there was a top table with all the wrestlers were there, and Animal was there, and Murdoch and Cade and Kennedy and all these guys. And I remember they were introduced as he came out. Joey Styles was doing the MC, you know. And I remember Sherry came out. She got the loudest roar without a shadow of a doubt.
Oh, definitely.
But I remember her calling. She waved. She didn't say anything when she came out. She just waved, you know, nearly like the Queen kind of thing, you know.
She was the Queen.
I remember she called Joey Styles over, and she said to Joey Styles, "Would you mind telling all these people just how lucky they are this morning to be having breakfast with me?" You know, all the other guys came out and just sat down and went, "Yeah, I'm Animal, I'm Cade, I'm Murdoch, I'm Ken." And, you know, Kennedy came out and did his thing, of course. But she just casually strolled out. And, like, she was kind of like, I remember at that breakfast, it was kind of weird because you're thinking of Sherry, you know. But she was kind of dressed down. She was nearly wearing kind of, you know, like an office suit. You know, that kind of way. And I was there going, sensational Sherry. It was mad to see it, you know? I was going, where's the glitz and all the stuff that you would expect? But I remember when she called Joey Styles over, and I know when she called Joey Styles over, he felt so uncomfortable, the look on him, because he thought he had done something wrong, you know, that kind of way. But she just said, just let all these people know how lucky they are to be having breakfast with me this morning. That was brilliant. Also,
the work never stops.
Yeah. That's kind of why I always took exception to it. I mean, I don't know why I'm always like, because when I'm off camera, I'm burying Vince McMahon, and when I'm on camera, I seem to be just praising him. But it's more when we talk about these things and we put it into perspective, we realize WWE gets, you know, they held women back. They didn't let women. I mean, Sherry was one of the stars of this man's show. Yeah. You know what I mean? And one of his go-to girls that like would always come back, and he had the utmost respect for her. So, you know, just it was a time where probably the paying, you know, viewer and the paying public didn't necessarily want to watch female pro wrestling. And like people, like, I know it's 2021 and all, people don't want to hear that, but you have to hear it. Like, put your snowflake brain aside for a while and get with the program and realize that at that time you had so many huge, larger than life men and characters that like it was like heavyweight boxing, right? It was like heavyweight boxing. When Mike Tyson was around and the major heavyweights of the day, you wanted to watch the middleweights and you wanted to watch the heavyweights. Nobody really gave a shit about the flyweights, bar someone like myself and Jay, who are fucking massive boxing fans. The general, you know, Joe Soap that wants to, you know, Joe is pointing at himself, exactly. The general Joe Soap that just wants to see what's Mike Tyson going to do. it translates over to wrestling. They wanted to see what's Macho Man going to do, what's Hulk Hogan going to do, what's the Ultimate Warrior going to do. Oh shit, who's this Undertaker guy? What the fuck is that? You know, who's King Kong Bundy? He's looks like a fucking slab of meat. You know, it's like that's just the way it was. And then, to be fair, when Vince did kind of go after the steroid trial, you notice they did try and run with the women's wrestling. They had Bull Nakano with Alundra Blaze, Medusa herself. So there were attempts there. So I just want to say, Sensational Sherry proves that the WWF didn't disrespect women behind the scenes or on camera. I mean, Sherry proves that if you've got,
it was just a case at the time. What sold, and the box office, the dollar bill has always been the boss, regardless of anything. And the world wasn't ready to watch women wrestle.
That's
it just
all
wasn't.
That's all it is. That's all.
Vinnie Mac has been dragging it forward for a long time. Again,
Absolutely.
Criticisms that you got to take into account time and place, and criticisms often don't equate to that equation either. So, But look, if you proved your worth as non-screen talent, regardless of gender, color, creed, regardless, if you were money, you were going over, and he proved it. Look, she was the perfect antithesis to I can't say that word. She was the perfect opposite. Yeah, I can't say that word. She was the perfect opposite to what was going on before with Macho. I mean, he used to have this angel on his shoulder, and he had this absolute screaming harlot devil on his shoulder, and him in the middle going, it just played out perfectly.
Well, that's a great way for me to say my final piece, because the real angel in my eyes was always Sensational Sherry, and also rest in peace. That one broke my heart too.
Yeah, I always remember when it broke about her passing away. I remember just how upset Ted DiBiase was. He was absolutely heartbroken. And I always remember the Hall of Fame induction as well was just absolutely brilliant.
I'm actually going to go and watch that later.
Again, it's well worth a rewatch, actually. Yeah. DiBiase is just unbelievable. Like,
Hopefully she gets a little with this Legend series on the network. It'd be lovely to see something on her, wouldn't it? I mean, it's long overdue.
I'd love to see it too, yeah. I mean, I think she's so undervalued, and her memory will always last with us.
Anyway. Yeah, listen, she's going to get it eventually. When we refuse to let a star, dwindle, eventually he listens. Eventually the company listens, and enough men say the name, it happens, and it's inevitable. But until then, keep watching her, keep YouTubing her, and just keep enjoying her work, because Jesus Christ, once in a lifetime talent.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's change it up a bit now from that, and talk about something. When we talk about kind of a little bit of comedy wrestling and stuff like that, a man who was endeared and loved on this podcast, no less one Akeem, Jay. And we cannot mention Akeem unless we mention the Joy of Soul.
The original Joy of Soul, bro. Fuck yes.
Bro. Bro.
Yeah, what a bombastic character, man. Really, wasn't he? He was in your face and glorious and
awesome.
Loved his fucking bit. Have you ever seen a manager get into it so hard? Like, I don't think he stopped being slick when the camera rolled. I think he slicked on home and slicked to his children.
Ice Cube in a suit. Jerry curls and everything.
You can sort of imagine him jumping out of the shower and sliding along the hall back to the bedroom to get dressed and everything and all that. Just
sliding to work.
Just always on. But I can
always on.
I always think, I mean, we know to this day now that our friend, the one-man gang, the Akeem gimmick was a punishment, if you like, and I could just
not to him.
No, but I could just imagine the two boys in the locker room walking in and going, right, we want you to do this now, right? And we're punishing you. This is a punishment. I can imagine Slick going, this is going to be quality. You know what I mean?
I got me an African dream, baby.
yeah, it was kind of like the white man has now arrived. Unbelievable. Like I just always remember the Akeem doing that dance and just Slick in the background with the cane just sliding by every
so often. Like, I'm from New Orleans, so don't ask me to do a South African accent, but if you want me to do a little jive, boom. Yeah.
He probably wasn't into it until he first sat down with Slick, and after about 5 minutes in this company, he's like, this is the greatest thing that has ever happened to me.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm not taking these clothes off.
I just love how when we're talking about Akeem, Jay's head doesn't stop moving.
Yeah, you have to though. He didn't stop moving.
Joe is doing the same. It's like we're all just moving. Akeem is the trigger word. If you ever find yourself in trouble, just mention Akeem.
Oh God! I told you to change it up. I told you to kind of,
and you did well.
And I suppose, Joe, when we talk about Slick, we have to talk about the natural Butch Reed. I know Jay, huge fan of Butch Reed.
I know you can't come to me for Butch Reed. It's got to be Jay on that. Like.
Joe, Butch Reed, the man who fashioned the headband way before Billy and Chuck.
Fucking right, man. It looked so good on him that it looked so good to Billy and Chuck.
Jeez, even Hogan took a slice. You seen this guy wearing yellow? The size of him, the headband. I need me some of that.
Slick, like he kind of looked like one of those guys that they just found on the side street of fucking South Central, and that's what he looked like. He just looked like some lad that'd be like, "Yeah, man, I can do that. Yeah. No problem, man. No problem."
He was an actual stereotype.
Yeah,
complete another stereotype, and he played up to it completely. And you could see he loved every minute of it.
Yeah.
No, he just completely played up to it. He knew it was a stereotype.
Yeah.
And he just went with it, and he got himself over. He got everyone around him over. He was just fantastic at it. He just played up.
He was a 70s pimp, right? You know what I mean? That's pretty much what he was, yeah.
Slick. Absolutely. He was just slick.
Well, to me, he was.
Even if there was no blaxploitation or 70s pimp culture, I still believe Slick could be slick.
Well, he is. He lives the gimmick. I've listened to the man talk. He lives the gimmick. Yeah, man. But
he's the proto Teddy Long. He's the gimmick they didn't let die. Like,
there you go. There you go.
Yeah. Even to this day, when you listen to if you tune into some of his ministries and stuff like that, he still talks in that promo kind of way, you know.
He's fucking deadly. He's fucking deadly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had to bring it back.
And I tell you what, the Hurt Locker would probably still all be together if he was still around. You know what I mean? If they'd given the boys to Slick, they'd still be running riot all over the world.
I'll tell you what. Mr. Tony Khan, Slick's available.
Bring him back, baby. We want him. We need him.
He'll get someone over for you. Trust me, Mo. I'm giving you pearls here. I'm giving you pearls here. Call Slick.
Awesome.
Hell of a worker. Hell of a worker.
Yeah, love Slick, yeah.
Awesome. Ian, I'm going to bring in a good one for you now. We can't mention the Hart Foundation without mentioning the mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart.
Very fair point. Yeah, absolutely. Music Man, Memphis Music Man. Fucking hell of a talent on the old strings and composing side of things as well. Jimmy Hart, good Lord. I mean, the epitome of the weasel, and I mean, not Jerry, or not, I was about to say Jerry Soul. Shout out to Jerry Soul. A good Irish talent. Love you, brother. He's going to be delighted with that, isn't he? But I mean, a weasel, not like Bobby the Brain Heenan, but an actual weasel, just a skinny little tiny fucking human who had that megaphone shouting in people's fucking faces. I mean, could you find a more annoying character? Like the epitome of the annoying little brother that wouldn't shut the fuck up and kept like robbing your toy or pinching you or just, you know, but always had.
And then after every toy he stole, he did that fucking laugh.
Yeah, I mean
that fucking laugh.
The high pitched voice, man. Like everything I mean, this guy is a genius also in his own right in wrestling. I mean, this guy composed all of the music, a lot of the music anyway. You know, I know we had we done a music episode that has never been released, and we are going to redo it with the new clan. So I think with Jimmy Hart, you know, they obviously brought him in for a certain set of skills, but he just got wrestling, you know, he just got it. And I think you made a point there with the Hart Foundation. That's only one part of it. I mean, the Hart Foundation were obviously doing their whole blue and black kind of thing, and they were just there. They were just a tag team, you know. And obviously, as Vince said, once he saw the pink and black, he was like, that's the one, that's your color. And when you bring Jimmy Hart into that equation, like, it's funny when a lot of people only think of the Hart Foundation as the babyface tag team. Like, some of my favorite matches are like the heel tag team with them wrestling the Bulldogs. Good Lord. I mean, how good was that big Rhino and Slick Brett back then? You know, he was almost going for a slick haircut, just putting the oil. He was definitely borrowing some of Slick's oil for sure.
He was greasy.
Sexual chocolate.
Yeah.
Coming to America. Was that Coming to America? It was, wasn't it?
Yeah, and the spray, the Soul Glow.
And the spray, the soul spray.
Glow.
Yeah.
Soul
Brett
Glow.
was definitely borrowing some of that, but it was, it's funny when I look back on that, because, we talked about someone like Brett, who wasn't a great promo at that time specifically. He became a great promo over time, I think, especially when he became a heel. But early on, good Lord, you didn't want to hear Brett talk much. You know what I mean? You wanted to hear a bit of Anvil because of that laugh, and just because he was awesome. But you had Jimmy Hart there then, that made those two boys just look like cocky bastards. You know what I mean? That allowed Jim and Brett to have the glasses on to hide the nerves in the eyes, so all you saw was just a big fucking slab of meat. And I think Jimmy, sorry Jay, I'll pass it over to you now. I think Jimmy, and I'm only using the Hart Foundation because you kind of mentioned it to me, Noel. What he did with that tag team, I think he's a pivotal part. And I'm not sure, I dare say, if you were to ask Brett and Jim when he was with us, that they would agree with that. Without Jimmy Hart, Bret Hart's career probably wouldn't be what it was, because you wouldn't have got to see just how far they could go. You know what I mean? In terms of getting the match time with the Bulldogs. So
he was a funny one. Well, most of our managers, when we talk about them, their designated role, you're a heel, you're a baby face, and there's a very clear definition there. But Jimmy was very fluid in the sense that his teams, when they came out, he was such a good hype man. He was a hype man while the match was going on with that megaphone, that you couldn't tell whether his team was going to get over because he was so entertaining, or whether he was going to be an in-your-face heel style. Like, it depended on who his boys were wrestling that week as to whether or not you viewed his team as babyface or heel. Like, I mean, traditionally,
great with the Nasty Boys, right? Actually, he was Nasty Boys,
and he also had a flirtation with Hulkamania and Hogan. I mean, he walked Hogan
WCW,
out.
Yeah.
No, and in WWE.
Oh no, I know, yeah.
There was and then you had, like, he really came into his own as I think the team that he most prominently became Jimmy Hart for me was the Rhythm and Blues, the Greg and Beefcake. He loved it, and you could see he loved it. It's two preposterous cartoon characters.
Well. It was music based too. You know what I mean?
It was ludicrous. It was pomp.
He wrote all
him.
that as well. He wrote all that.
He was a talent. He was an absolute. Again, like I said earlier on, some men are everything to all men, and he was one of them. He's like, you know what this needs, and you're like, we're going to listen to you because you haven't been fucking wrong yet.
And just a little sad point as well. Not to bring the mood down, like based on last week's version, but like for anybody that watched the Legend House, on the network, I mean, that was one of the most heart-wrenching fucking scenes. I'm not even going to talk about what it was. For anybody that hasn't seen it, watch it. But it's funny because you see Piper, and Piper gets real emotional. Piper actually starts crying with Duggan when Jimmy Hart talks about, his life and some of the traumas that he's had when they're all at the round table. And they were like, here we are giving this guy shit all the time because he's an easy target to pick on. And I never knew this story. Jimmy was someone that was the butt of all the jokes constantly, but just took it on the chin and was always, came to work with a smile on his face, and hell of a human being, hell of a talent, both inside and outside of the ring. And I think we would be remiss without talking about managers and pro wrestling in general without mentioning Jimmy Hart.
His genius is often overlooked because of how well he played his gimmick. He was a very smart man. He was a very ring savvy man. He was a very, very He was a pioneer of, like I said, he was more of an MC on the ropes as opposed to a standard manager. He was working the crowd with that megaphone.
I've often described him as the commentator for the live crowd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that's how I've often described him. Also, his marriage with Honky Tonk, I mean, that was you know, another worker that we love on this show. The Honky
Joe, what do you think with Jimmy Hart with Honky Tonk? I mean, I think that's fucking tailor-made, right?
The catharsis of Warrior taking that belt off Honky Tonk wouldn't have been half as satisfying if it wasn't for the man in the corner talking shit.
Yeah.
And wearing those obnoxious jackets, talking his bollocks on the bullhorn. You know what I mean? It was, you know, it still would have been brilliant to have Honky beaten, but he wouldn't have held the title nearly as long, and two, it wouldn't have been as explosive a reaction if it wasn't for him. Like, you know, it was absolutely fantastic.
And he was one of those jelly leg motherfuckers as well. Do you remember? Because the clothes that he always wore were too big for him. When he kind of went like that, he always looked like the legs were slipping on something. You're like, is this lad fucking? It's his first day on ice skates, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's true as well. I never thought of that. It was with the Honky run, with the Hot run. It was more so we were tuning in every week to wait to see if he lost, and it was because of Honky or because of Jimmy Hart. We were waiting to see when the loss would happen. It wasn't the other way around. We were waiting to see who Honky would beat again. It was just 100%. 100%, Joe. 100%.
I also remember, Ian, back to the time when you were talking about the Hart Foundation and the Bulldogs. I remember when the Bulldogs did eventually get hold of him, and his glasses came off, and the madness in his eyes, because I'd never seen his eyes before.
Me neither. Nobody did. That was the part of it. Yeah.
And I remember when they came off, he just had these like bulbous, crazy white eyes, like, you know what I mean? Just like, it was mad.
Do you remember? I know you're going to bring up a certain Captain Lou Abano in a while, but it's like he's one of my personal favorite managers of all time, just because of the character that he was. But the back and forth that they used to have, and do you remember he used to annoy the shit out of Gorilla Monsoon, and also. This is where, welcome the return of Lord Alfred Hayes. Lord Alfred Hayes fucking despised him on air. Oh, good Lord, Gorilla. He's the plague of my life.
Absolutely.
Because Jimmy used to be walking around in MSG when they just had that little fucking ping pong table that they used to commentate from at the side of the ring. And Jimmy be going around fucking shouting in Lord Alfred Hayes' ear. On the megaphone. And he goes, oh, good Lord, Gorilla, he's the plague of my life.